I really do like these locomotives. I'm a big fan of small shunting locomotives, but with these, Heljan really have captured the charm, and it all builds up into a really nice package. Hi there everyone, welcome back, and I hope I find you well, hope you're keeping well in these really strange times that we still find ourselves in. Today we've got a review of a model. It's a re-release of a model. We've actually reviewed the V1 version of this. Now you're thinking, V1? What's that all about? Well, there's two different versions of this particular model. They produced the V1 and the V2, which basically means the ones with just vacuum brakes and the ones with vacuum and air brakes. And there are detail differences between the two. Now, I got the original version in the first batch that Heljan released. Really pleased with this. It's a quirky little locomotive, but they've done another batch and it's included some industrial liveries, BR green liveries, and of course BR tops blue. I really am a sucker for these, so I took the opportunity to pick up one, and actually it was the factory weathered example, and I was quite interested to see just how Heljan had performed with this, because they did such a great job with the Class 27 and Class 33 factory weathering. So without further ado, let's take a trip with the sponsor today, Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories. These are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. And Bolton Model Mart, Bolton's premier stockist of model trains, model kits and remote control vehicles. With a big stock in store today, ready to go. Try them now on the website link down below for a fast, friendly service. And don't forget as well to stick around to the end of the video, and we'll be showing you, in association with Trainomatic, a full DCC fitting guide for this model. So if that's something that you need to know the details on, we've got you covered. But without further ado, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying come with me. I'm looking forward to showing you this model. This is the model. It's the new Class 7 diesel shunter from Heljan. I say new, these are the new livery variations. It's already been out before, about a year, 18 months or so ago. And I did pick up one from that particular batch, but when I saw that the new batch was out, and more importantly that they had a factory weathered version, I thought that this was really too good an offer to miss, especially as they were at a really great price at some of the retailers. We've got a catalogue number there of 29151, and as you see underneath, Class 07 V2. Now you might remember, if you cast your mind back, about the review that we did of, it was actually 07010 from the previous batch, and we talked a little bit about that being V1. Now Heljan did tool up for both different versions, and because this is different from the previous one, it gives me the ideal opportunity to show you what is different between the V1 and V2 models, and Heljan has actually tooled up and captured both variants really well. And you can see there at the end, factory weathered. Now it doesn't say anywhere on the box, but this model is DCC ready, and it takes a 6-pin decoder, and if you stick around to the end of the video you will see a DCC fitting guide in association with Trainomatic, so stay tuned for that. The box itself is the pretty standard Heljan box with the outer slipcase to reveal the card and plastic inner. And just down inside here, I'm going to get this out to show you, we've got a little bit about the actual model, and I did highlight this actually when we did the previous Class 07 review, just how many pieces go into one of these. Now I know a lot of people do whine about the upward trend in prices, but when you look at this, what you're actually getting is a very high quality kit that somebody has then expertly assembled and painted. And I defy you to be able to take any kit that is on the market and be able to paint, finish and get it to that finished product and be to this sort of standard and come in under the price that one of these would be. And I actually like the fact that Heljan and other manufacturers as well do this and go, hey, actually, no, you know, there is a lot that goes into one of these. We've also got, if we turn over a little bit about the history of the class and how these were principally ordered to work at Southampton docks. They did actually get to a few other places like Eastleigh Works, but ostensibly these were to replace the USA dock tanks. Also included in here is a little bit of information that we'll come to later on in the DCC fitting guide, and it actually is really easy to get into one of these models. The rest of the model is just in the pretty standard slipcase that we've come to expect, but there is an extra pack of detailing parts, and what you see here is we've got some plugs, and these just plug the gap in the buffer beam if you don't go down the route of using the NEM socket. One thing I would say about these though is that they're not weathered. They are presented absolutely clean, which is fine on any of the other models that they've released, but on this model they're going to look a little bit odd and need a little bit of blending in. It's also nice to see that we appear to have spares. They've given 2 sets of sprues. Looking to the other side, we've also got train reporting numbers. Now this was a feature of the southern region, and these are really nicely done actually. It's really sharp, the numbers on there. They're not just plain white discs. You've actually got numbers on all of these, and then we've got all of the brake pipes in there as well. And the only way you can actually apply all of these is if you're not using the tension lock couplings. So all of this I'm going to put to one side because I do use those couplings, and it's an either or thing. So I'm just going to lift this out. We can immediately see there that the difference between this and the V1 model that we reviewed before, and actually just to help you out I have grabbed that model, and you can see there that there are straight out of the box a number of very obvious detail differences that have been captured perfectly. Most obviously is this cabinet on the side of the running plate. That is not on the V1 version, and that is for the extra braking system for the high level air pipes, the air brakes, so that these could be used to move coaching stock, EMUs, that kind of thing, and they were used at the Southampton Ocean Terminal for shunting the passenger trains in and out that were electric and therefore couldn't actually run off the juice without having an additional motive power source such as these. You can also see again there's some extra pipe work on the tops of the bonnets, and another biggie is if I then pick them both up and show you the front end, we've got just there all of the high level pipes and the equipment for that all in place, which is not on the V1 version. Turning the locomotive round as well, again at the other end we have a repeat of the high level equipment. The rest of the model is pretty much the same. The V2 version, this is true to prototype. There were some detail differences between locomotives, and as you can see there, the actual roof of the cab on this was blue, whereas on 07010 it's in grey, as are the roof-mounted air horns. So it is nice to see the detail differences. It's not just one livery fits all, and I guess it shows that the research has been done and the little quirks in livery between different locomotives in the whole class have been captured. The factory weathering is, for me, I'm not sure it's one of my favourite factory weatherings. It has to be said that the Class 33s that recently came through, I bought one and the factory weathering on that was absolutely superb. Ditto for the Class 27, number 27001. I thought that the factory weathering on that was again absolutely superb. But on this it just seems a little bit not quite with the finesse. The actual hand railings, I'm not sure whether the weathering has kind of rubbed off in the packaging or with a little bit of handling when I've fitted the tension lock couplings, but it doesn't feel quite as good as what we saw on the 27 and the 33. The other area where there's factory weathering I'm not entirely convinced by is on these underslung tanks here, and you can see it's almost like the weathering has gone on as a weathering wash and has then been rubbed before the weathering wash has fully dried. But I think there's a part of me that is thinking that they are actually working from specific photographs, and I'm prepared to give the benefit of the doubt. It's not a bad weathering job. It is certainly one which is very different from I've seen on other locomotives, but it has to be remembered that as dockside shunting locomotives, these locomotives would have got filthy. They wouldn't have been kept as clean as mainline locomotives, and indeed these locomotives really never ventured onto the mainline particularly. They suffered from hot axle boxes. It was a design flaw of the Ruston design that even though that they were intended to be able to do local trip workings, the first locomotive delivered actually ran hot on its axle boxes, and it was found that prolonged running at the 20-mile-an-hour top speed, they just burnt them out. So from then on, deliveries to and from the works where they were maintained were actually done by road transport, and it must have been one of the earliest regular uses of road transportation of railway locomotives in this country. It's become a very common sight, but back then it wouldn't have been. Now, not all of the class lasted long enough to get tops numbers, and I believe 3 at least were withdrawn without ever receiving their tops numbers, although 07007 did actually last at Eastleigh Works and may have subsequently had the tops number applied during the preservation period. Many of these locomotives, as they became withdrawn, did pass on into industrial usage, and it is nice to see that Heljan in their range have really catered for the model in doing an awful lot of the British Industrial Sand, the Peakstone livery in the yellow, Harry Needle Railroad Company, orange and black. There are so many different liveries out there. It really is nice to see that the industrial modeler is well cared for. The rest of the model is really exquisitely done. We've got an awful lot of detail, and actually the difference between this and the V1 model you can see gives you an awful lot of this extra fine detail in the form of the pipework, and it really is nicely done. I missed out on 05005, which was in the first batch, which would have been with the high level air pipes, and actually looking at this is making me feel sorry actually that I didn't get that model in the end, because I think that this is a much nicer model with the extra detail. The cabinets on the side here do appear to be a separately applied moulding, but they are actually pretty substantially attached, so there's no risk of any of these extra bits falling off. I know it has been a criticism in the past of Heljan models from some quarters that a lot of the detailing parts are very fragile, but I've not experienced any issues with this whatsoever, and it has been extensively run upstairs on Weir Yard. The weathering, I feel, does actually enhance things like the wasp stripes. It's an area that these shunting locos look a bit toy-like when they're clean, and the weathering helps to mute down the yellows, the oranges, and just kind of make it look more like a real locomotive. It's interesting to see that on the face of it, it does look like Heljan have gone for a slightly faded, washed out yellow underneath the weathering, and that is really nice to see. You can see just how much of a difference it does make. All of the handrails are metal and actually really, really robust. I've not had any problems with these, and I know that some other manufacturers, particularly the Bachmann Class 4 shunters, were an absolute pain with these handrails across the edges of the bonnets, just getting broken through everyday handling. So it's nice to see a model that is incredibly robust in that department. The actual printing of the number, the BR double arrow and the data tops panel is really nicely done. There's not a lot else on these models apart from the wasp stripes, but it does all combine together to be a really nice package. The lures in the engine bonnet sides are actually really nicely done as well. I'm just looking at those. They are quite deep. I think they are actually part of the side there, but it's so nicely done. They do look like they go all the way into the model, and that really is an exquisite plus side of this model. The rest of the paint finish looked ever so slightly fuzzy to me. When I compare it to the previous batch, the previous batch does appear to have ever so slightly more defined edges on some of those body side panels, as if, I don't know whether the weathering has kind of collected and filled in some of the panel gaps, but certainly it looked a little bit sharper to me on the older model, but I don't think there's a huge amount in it, to be honest, and certainly it's not something that detracts in any major way for me with the model. If we look inside the cab, we've got a fully modelled cab interior there, flush glazing, and it really is nicely done. And if you want to fit a crew, this model really does give easy access inside. Grab hold of the cab, pull it on up, and you've got full access to the interior to be able to fit crews and anything else that you want. It also means that fitting sound to this model is relatively easy if you want to go down that route. There are no off-the-peg sound chips that I'm aware of, but certainly you can get the sound files. You can get your sound chip blown with the Class 7 sound. And also there is plenty of room inside the base of this cab for a small sugar cube speaker pointing upwards, and really it shouldn't provide any great barrier to anybody wanting to go the sound route. The buffers on this model are fully sprung, and they are such a fine turned metal. I really like the look of these. Heljan have captured the profile of the prototypes so well. Couplings, as alluded to before, are these slimline tension locks. You have to fit them yourself, and I found that to be a little bit fiddly. They do have some lateral movement on the NEM pocket, but the NEM pocket itself can move further than the coupling itself would allow, and that can make it a little bit tricky to get them in. The other thing I found as well is that the model itself comes with cranked couplings. They're cranked down ever so slightly, but when I offered the Locomotive up to rolling stock, it just felt like it was much better provided for with straight couplings. So I've actually changed these, and these aren't the ones that come with it. And what it does mean is that the couplings now line up with all my rolling stock. Again, it's only a minor gripe, but it's one that I would have thought that perhaps Heljan would have noticed from the previous batch. Heljan have captured the really quite short wheelbase of these locomotives really well. They were a little bit of an odd design, and you can't help but be left thinking why they didn't just use Class 8 diesel shunters. Well, actually the reason was the very tight track work in parts of Southampton docks. They wanted a 6-coupled locomotive that had a reasonable amount of power, but the Class 8 was just that little bit too long, which was why this bespoke class of locomotives was ordered for the docks. Heljan has captured that really well, and also this lubricator mechanism as well. It's a little bit difficult to make out on the weathered model, but if I bring back in the unweathered model, you can see just how nicely that is all captured in there. Below the soul bar in the chassis we have a lot of extra detail. It picks up power from all 6 wheels, and we've got these actually quite strong metal sanding pipes too, and it all builds up into a really nice package. Now, DCC fitting this model is actually quite easy, so I'm going to run through that with you now. We recommend the direct plug 6-pin Train-O-Matic decoder, which gives you all of the functions that you need and fits perfectly within the space that is designed into this model. First up, remove the cab. So grasp firmly but not too squeezing it, and just you'll feel it unclip and it just pulls up vertically. Put that to one side. The next stage, you need to get a small jeweler's crosshead screwdriver. Picking the locomotive up carefully by the running plate, don't grab hold of the pipework detail, you will find down in the front there are two screws, a little bit difficult to see on this camera, but they're hidden away just behind these steps. Very carefully get down in there and unscrew them. Don't lose these screws. Locomotive back down, and the whole body now pulls off. On this V2 model, you do have an extra little issue to work out, and that is these pipes just need to move around each other. It's quite easy to just tease them apart and unhook them. And then the whole body comes off. If you're DCC fitting the V1 model, that will just lift straight off and you don't have to worry about that extra pipe work. Inside here you can see the cutaway in the top of the chassis. There'll be two pieces of tape, you'll need to cut them and then very, very carefully pull to one side all the wiring. This can be a little bit fiddly, and whatever you do, don't put excess strain on any of these wires. The main circuit board of the locomotive is here. There's the socket, and then I've already fitted this with the 6-pin decoder, but out of the box what you will see is the blanking plate in this position. If you get a small screwdriver and very carefully lever this out from the little recess. It is an interference fit. It isn't actually stuck in, glued in, screwed in, and it will come out. Again, be really careful of these wires. This is the Trainomatic 6-pin decoder. I'm just going to pull this out very carefully to show you. When it comes to plugging in and unplugging these 6-pin decoders, very gentle pressure is all you need. If you're having to force it, you're liable to either have the pins misaligned or be breaking something. This is the orientation of the chip that you need. You'll find on the other side the QC sticker. That always faces down into the locomotive, and you should have just the 4 solder tabs at the back visible, and they plug neatly back into that 6-pin socket. Make sure that you get them lined up properly, and then a little bit of a wiggle, slowly work the chip in all the way home, and then it's simply a case of tucking the circuit board and the decoder back into place. They will just squeeze in, interference fit, and then neaten up any of these wires you've had to move to one side. What you don't want is them catching down inside the body sides. There are a couple of grooves at the back here to feed the wires into, and then it's simply a case of putting the body back on. On this V2 model, as you put it back down, you'll see that these two pipes need to just be teased around the rest of the pipework and fittings. Once you get them in the right place, they're really easy to go in. And then it's a case of lining up the wire handrails and gently pushing the body home, and then refitting the screws. And then reapply the cab. You'll see on the bottom of the cab there is a cutout on one side and it is flat on the other. The cutout side faces towards the larger of the two bonnets. Line it up and you'll feel it just slide down, and then a gentle pressure and you'll feel it click into place. And DCC fitting any of these locomotives in any livery is exactly the same. Running characteristics of this model are very, very good. Despite its very short wheelbase, I've had no problems whatsoever with it over point work, and it does have a very silky smooth mechanism. It's something that Heljan are renowned for, and certainly their Class 5 diesel shunters in 00 is so silky smooth that it has become the benchmark against which I measure every single other locomotive. These particular locomotives do compare very, very favourable with that Class 5. It just feels very smooth. There's no sign of juddering with these. The pickup from slow to fast is very, very smooth. And even on DC, I had no problems. And when adding that DCC decoder, whilst you could argue that running characteristics would always be improved on such a short wheelbase locomotive by the addition of a stay-alive, and indeed Train-O-Matic do a smart power pack that is fully compatible with these decoders, I haven't actually found any great need for them. But if you decide to go down that route for extra reliability, the smart power pack does actually fit in the cab. I've had no long-term problems with these, and if anything, as they run and run, I found they only get smoother as that mechanism beds on in. That brings us to the scores. First up is finish, and the weathered finish from Heljan is growing on me on this model, but I did feel it wasn't quite as good as that we saw on the Class 27 and the Class 33 that came from them recently. I think though maybe we've been spoilt by them because those were really, really good finishes, and if you haven't seen them, do check out my review of the Class 27 model to see exactly what I mean. But this, it does look like a grimy locomotive. Rather than being brake dust, it looks like a coating of oil, that kind of thing. So, in some respects, it's a different style of weathering to suit a different locomotive type and the way that it would work in real life. So, it is very much growing on me. I do like the faded yellow on the wasp stripes, and that goes towards a locomotive finish that looks like it's been out in the sun, uncared for, workaday workhorse, and that is captured really, really well. So I'm going to give this model an 8.9 out of 10. Next up is functionality. And actually this locomotive ran really, really well. It's something that Heljan very much do best, silky smooth mechanisms, and this locomotive did not disappoint. It was able to pull a reasonable length train, certainly one that was very fitting of what the prototype would have pulled. It didn't show any real sign of struggling even up and down gradients over point works, and it was just very, very sure-footed. On DCC, those all-wheel pickups worked really, really well without any kind of stuttering. And one thing that I really do like is that Heljan have used the function on the DCC decoder to control the directional lights. The prototypes had these directional lights and they are captured perfectly in model form with this Class 7 shunter. So I'm going to give this 9.1 out of 10. Ease of use. The DCC fitting is really, really easy. There's a little extra step for this, the V2 version compared to the V1, but actually it doesn't really cause any major issues. The chip itself just slots straight on in with easy access, and the recess in the top of the chassis allows for a positive fit to keep that chip in place. There is provision for wires to go to either a speaker if you're using a sound chip, or to a smart power pack if you want a stay alive function, and that leads into the cab really, really nicely through the recess that I briefly talked about at the front, and that cab has enough space for either a sugar cube speaker or the big capacitors from the power pack, so it really couldn't be simpler. 2 screws is all it takes and a plug-in cab. It also means that you can add a crew if you so desire. So I'm going to give this a 9.9 out of 10. Aesthetics. I do think that Heljan have very much captured the strange charm of these locomotives. They might not have been widespread during their operational life with British Rail, but they did move further afield under their industrial use post-BR. So actually these locomotives are eminently suitable for a whole host of different layouts. In preservation, a number have survived and are resplendent around the country on preserved lines. They might not be the most useful for running passenger services because of those hot axle boxes, but certainly their jaunty charm is very, very well captured. So in aesthetics, I have to say I really like the fact that they've tooled up for both different versions and captured them well. I'm going to give this a 9.8 out of 10. Finally, we have value for money. These locomotives at the moment are available for around the £109.50 mark, and we've got an affiliate link down below to take you to Rails of Sheffield, where you can pick up every single version that's currently available. In this day and age, £109 for a shunting locomotive is well within the ballpark. In fact, it's probably at the lower end of the ballpark of what all the manufacturers are charging for a brand new shunting locomotive like this, with only maybe one or two locomotives on the market coming in cheaper than that. So for the locomotive that you get, the reliability that you get, the features that you get, I have no hesitation to award this model the value for money score of 9 out of 10. That gives us a total overall score for this locomotive of 46.7, and that is really a great score for a great model. Would I have any hesitation in adding more of these to my collection? No hesitation at all. I really do like these locomotives. I'm a big fan of small shunting locomotives, but with these, Heljan really have captured the charm of this rather strange class ever so well. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Don't forget to tickle that like button, show some love for the channel, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and share this video too. Show other people about the great stuff that we've been reviewing on this channel. Stay tuned as well, we've got an update video coming on Friday, and also you can check us out over on Patreon and help us to make the videos that you want to see on this channel. I'd love to hear from you too. Put your comments down below. And I do read every single one, even if I don't get a chance to reply. But I'd love to hear about what you think about the Heljan Class 7 diesel shunters. Do you have one? Have you experienced the joy and fun that I've had out of these models? Or have you had a problem and you think it's only right to share that? I'd love to hear from you. Do leave your comments down below. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Coates, and Bolton Model Mart, Bolton's premier stockist of model trains, model kits and remote control vehicles. With a big stock in store today, ready to go. Try them now on the website link down below for a fast, friendly service. Saying take immense care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian Smith, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Trish Bits, and Sparky107107. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.